All right, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of This Personal. I always say I'm so excited. Today, I'm going to sit in this moment for a very, very long time. I have someone who I've read and looked up to and admired for so long in this writing game, and I'm just so excited to have a conversation with her. If you don't know who she is, I feel bad for you. You really, really need to open a book. um, I am so honored to have the privilege to speak to this lady today. Please introduce yourself and feel free if you want to list and read, talk about every book that you've written. I am here for it. I know
We'll
you don't
be,
have to, but I'm here
we'll
for it.
be here for a very long time because as of the end of last year, I'm up to 106 books. So we're not going to talk about all of them.
That, oh
We've
my
been at this for a
gosh.
while.
Wow. Wow. And
Yeah.
for those who don't know, can just give us a small snippet of who you are.
Oh my gosh. I, I'm Nikki Grimes. I specialize in books for children and young adults. But yeah, you need to know I'm sort of all over the place in terms of the ages that I write for and the kinds of books that I write because I bore easily. I can't do just one thing all the time. So I'm writing poetry and fiction and nonfiction. I've got board books and chapter books and picture books and novels for middle grade and for young adults and occasionally for adults. So I'm hitting on a lot of different pistons depending on the subject matter and the voices that come to me. A story will come in a particular voice and I follow whatever that is organically. Sometimes I start out thinking the story I have in mind is you know a picture book, and
Mhm.
and it just isn't happening as I try to write it. And then I finally understand, oh wait, the voice of the story is coming to me as a 10-year-old. Oh, okay. This wants to be a middle grade book. Good. And then I follow that, and sure enough, that's what it wanted to be. Sometimes it's for, an older audience. And so then I lean into that. So yeah, I'm very much um, character driven. There's
Mhm.
sort of two camps with authors in general, broad generalization, author driven or character driven, plot driven. And you certainly need both elements in every story, but character driven author like myself, that's what I lead with. Sometimes I have a character before I even know what the story is going to be. The character will often suggest the story that I need to write about him or her, and they are very bossy. They will tell me, "You will not put those words into my mouth," and remind me that the story is coming through me. I don't have nearly as much control as you would think
Wow.
because it will tell me, "No, I'm not saying that. I'm not doing that. That is not who I am." And they're always surprises to me. I have this chapter book character named Diamond Daniel,
Mhm.
and I'm not sure where she came from because she loves math. Math makes sense to her. It's how she makes sense of the world. And I run in the other direction when it comes to math. I chose my university based on not requiring higher math. Okay. And then here comes this character, and I'm like, who are you? Where did you come from? She's like completely her own person, you know? So, yeah, writing is
And
strange.
oh my gosh, again, I appreciate you so much, and I'm gonna continue to say this while we're here. Like you really have set the precedent for quality of writing. You write a lot, you have a lot of books, but one of the things I love about you the most is that your quality stays the same.
Thank you.
You are so versatile in what you do. And I love Diamond Daniels as an elementary teacher. We love talking about her attitude and how she walks the world. Like, we love everything about her. I love, I mean, some of your most recent stuff, like A Walk in the Woods. Like, you do such a great job of capturing moments.
Thank you.
And I mean, yeah, I guess I have a lot of questions for you, but my question is always like, how do you? One of the questions is like, how do you always do it? How do you always hit the mark? How do you know you hit the mark? Or is that not even something you think about? Because I know you consistently write for Black and Brown people. I know that is something that is always on your mind when you're putting the pen to the paper. So we'll come back to that. But first, I want to know about Little Nicky. Who is Little Nicky? Tell us
Oh
about
my
Little
god,
Nicky.
how do I talk about that? You know, I had a really, really rough childhood, come out of trauma, broken homes, grew up in and out of foster care, bounced around a lot. So, part of the reason that I write, I mean, I was always fascinated with words from day
Mhm,
one. I used to do word puzzles and jumbles, and I'd make up my own games. I'd go to the dictionary and flip through, my eyes closed, and I'd pick out a word, and then I'd figure
mhm,
out all the different ways I could use that word. So I
mhm,
was always about word play, and poetry in a very general sense is really wordplay. And so it was that wordplay that led me to the genre I'm most known for. I
mhm,
work in other genres, but poetry is absolutely my first love and my first language. And
mhm,
it's, I go back to it again and again. But I love language. I was fascinated with the idea that you could write something down and someone you could write something funny and someone 1,000 miles away could read it and laugh. That
mhm,
words on paper are that powerful. And so I was hooked in that way early on. And it was for the first, I don't know, 10 years probably, writing was a coping strategy. It was how I
mhm,
got through the world. Reading and writing were my survival tools. And my first writing came out of just being, frustrated and full of, rage and questions and just all kinds of mixed up feelings and needing to get them out of me somehow.
mhm,
And
mhm,
getting up one night and just feeling like I was going to burst if I didn't get these emotions out, and grabbed a piece of paper and a pen and just started to write, what was on my mind, what was on my heart, what, the feelings I was having. And at the end of it, realizing while nothing had changed, I felt lighter
mhm,
and I could breathe. And I realized I've hit on something. I
mhm.
wasn't old enough to be able to articulate it, but I knew whatever this thing was, it was magic and I had to hold on to it,
Wow.
you
Wow.
know? And so I would go
Yeah.
back to it, again and again.
I love that. And I think I've talked about it before, how writing is such a form of like liberation. It can really allow one to release so many things that have influenced us. And I really, really love that. I really, really love that. I think that is so important to share. I think it's great that you were able to find that. Nikki, were there people around you during that time influencing you to write?
All right, what I talked to you about, I wrote about in a poem called Isolation Station in my memoir, Ordinary Hazards, which you have you read this?
Yes.
Okay. This was the poem that tried where I tried to capture that. The house was full, but with strangers, and I was there by myself in the dark, in a tiny pocket of a room, with a tiny bed to sleep in, and little space for the fears I'd packed in my suitcase, which makes no sense because why would I bring them with me? And the night sounds far into the city, girl, left me tossing and turning. There was no more room in my head to hold the anger rising like steam, searing the edges of my brain. There was not even a shelf where I could stack the questions, crying out for answers that wouldn't come. Why did mom have love liquor more than Carol, more than me? Why did daddy let strangers take us away? Why did grandma refuse to come to our rescue? Why didn't they love us? Why didn't anyone love us enough? Why? Stop! I leaped out of bed, switched on the light, grabbed a piece of paper and a pen, stabbed the page, and let my thoughts gush like a geyser, shooting high into the moonless sky. Then, falling down on the page, I held captive till every line was stained with my feelings, and the heat of them finally had a chance to cool, and suddenly I could breathe. Breathe, breathe. And there was once again room enough in my head and my heart to just be. Then I closed my eyes and it was morning.
He, gosh, it captures so many moments and feelings, and it says so much about you as a writer. Like that alone, like you did it. If you were to tell, if someone was to ask you what is your story, and you were to give them that really gives them such an image of so much of why you started writing, so much of the things that you had to, just face at such a young age. And I think it's such a testament to who you are as a person today,
Thank
um,
you.
because you were given every choice not to write, not to lean into the things that you love the most. And what what continues to inspire you to be creative, to evolve as a writer during today? Because again, as you mentioned before, like you have over like 100 books and you've done so much. Like what makes you continue to feel inspired to write today?
Well, for one thing, I'm always looking for something new. I really appreciate and embrace a challenge. And I mean, there's plenty of them in the world. There's lots of things still to write about and
Mm,
to explore. But I have learned of the value of walking into my fear. So if I get an
mm,
idea for something and it scares me, I know that's
mm,
exactly the thing I need to lean into. I'm going to
mhm,
learn something. I'm going to grow in a way that I wouldn't otherwise by following that path. And I still do at times write to work through things. I came back very much to almost daily writing during the early days of the pandemic because it just was so wild. And, the protests were going on and just all of it was just so much. And I found I had to write just to kind of cope. And it was really interesting because I I would post some of these poems online and I found out they were doing for other people what they were doing for me as I was trying to work
mm,
out something for myself and I was sharing it. Other people were saying, "Yes, that was what I'm feeling too. Thank you for saying that." You know,
mhm,
thank you for
mhm,
giving me the words for what I'm feeling right now. So I there's still that element of it, but there are still so many intersectionalities that have never been written about, especially in the field of children's literature, but in general.
Mhm.
So I'm really excited about a book coming out, I think next year. It's hard to keep up. I Years ago I'd done a picture book biography
Mhm.
of Bessie Coleman, the pilot. And in researching her, I discovered that her father was Choctaw. And so then I started thinking about this character who was Black Choctaw and playing with an idea for a picture book about him. And it ended up in a file. I forgot about it. I
Mhm.
mean, I completely forgot about it for decades. And then
Wow.
last year, the year before, I started working on my estate planning. And so part of that was going through my files so that I could identify literary product for anybody who comes after me so they don't have to go through every file. I have a
Mm.
lot of
Mhm.
files to figure out where the literature is. That meant I had to read things. I still have to do more of that. I haven't gone through all my files, but so I started this process, and in one of the files was this story about this kid who was afraid of the dark, and the way his mom dealt with it was to introduce him to the dream catcher, right? And so it was a story about that. So I come across this thing a couple decades later, whatever it is, and I realize I don't even know if I get to tell this story now because the landscape has changed. We're all about own voices. Do I even get to tell the story now? So I contacted one of my native friends, and I said, who's an author, and I said, Sin, what do I do with this? And I tell her about it, and she says, send me a copy. And she reads it, and she comes back with a couple of suggestions, and one of them is to collaborate with a Choctaw author. And there's somebody who she's been mentoring who does middle grade. She's never done a picture book, but she said, you know, check it out. And I said, that's interesting to me. So we met online and talked and we clicked immediately. And so we started working on this and I ended up revamping the story. I set aside the whole original story because I realized, well, first of all, other people have written about dream catchers. It's not
Mhm.
like and I was gonna we were gonna bring in elders and make sure we had the permission and authority to do the subject matter. But I realized in the process, wait a minute, there's something else going on here that's more important. There
Mhm.
are no books about Black Indigenous characters, period.
Mhm.
Let's
Mm.
lean into that because that
Wow.
matters, right? So I changed up the story, and now it's about same emotional issue. He's dealing with fear, but instead, the response this time is his mother introducing him to ancestors on both sides of his family who proved to him that he comes from such strength. He has no reason to be
Wow.
afraid of
Wow.
dreams. On his mother's side of the family, there's an ancestor who survived the Trail of Tears. On the father's side of the family, it's an ancestor who survived the Tulsa Race Massacre.
Oh my.
So
This
I
is
get
in your
to talk about
archives?
both things.
This is in your archives? I can't
Right.
do this.
So
Oh
I
my
get to talk
god.
about both things in this picture book.
Oh my
And
god.
that Stacy and I now worked on together, and I'm just so excited about it. But it also woke me up to the fact that there are all these other people groups.
Mhm.
There are so many intersections of
Mhm.
of Black people with Japanese, with Italian, with you name
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And you go to the shelf, you don't find them anywhere. So there's all
No.
these people groups left that we still need to, bring into the literary fold, into the canon, and also moving in another direction to encourage the storytellers among these groups to start writing their own stories. So there's tons to keep me excited and motivated and inspired for longer than I'm going to be here.
I would pay big money to look at your archives. I would pay big money to do that. Nikki, you do such a great job online. I have two questions for you. Number one is I think you do such a great job online talking about your highs and lows. For
Mhm.
someone who's so accomplished as a writer, you still share about manuscripts not passing or deadlines. And I think that's one of the other reasons why I enjoy you so much because you keep it so real. For someone who, again, is so accomplished, you still share that you can still struggle, like you're still human. You don't just share your wins online. And I really, really appreciate that. For someone who is very new to publishing, seeing someone like you talk about those experiences and how you navigate them has been very, very helpful for me. So I really, really appreciate that because it makes you human, which you are, right? It just makes sense. Like in my mind, it's like she's a superhero. She is like flying through brick walls and knocking it. But of course, you have moments where a manuscript doesn't work or everything isn't going the way that you want it to. And you do a really good job of just letting us know that online. And again, I appreciate that because not everyone does that. And I mean, they don't have to. But for
No,
someone like you, it really shows who you are as a person.
thank you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
everybody struggles with things, this whole
Mm.
mystique of, well, you just get that first contract, and after that, it's you're sailing, and everything is wonderful and automatic. And like, no, you
Yeah.
talk to Jane, and Jane talks about this all the time. Jane Yolen, who's
Mhm.
what is her book count is like close to 500 at this point. I mean, she's
Uh-huh.
been here since forever. And she constantly will have these posts where she says, yeah, well, two things rejected today, but I got one yes, on something else. And
Yeah.
people are like, what? Like,
No,
yes,
exactly.
this
Yeah.
this is life. It's, this is what goes with this territory, you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so you just have to figure out how you're going to navigate it and who you are and whose you are and understand
Mhm.
that and work from that space, and you just keep going.
Yeah.
And if you're not prepared for that, it really puts you at a disadvantage. I don't want people to be at a disadvantage. This business
Mhm.
is hard enough when you know what you're doing and you know all of that. And
Yeah.
if you don't know these things, it just, for some people, it becomes impossible. And for that reason, I started working a couple years ago. I was ill for like a year, a little over a
Mhm.
year, and almost died twice. Didn't know if I was still going to be here.
Gosh.
And I was really driven to start work on a book that I was like, okay, this may be the last book I get to write, but I have to write it. And it's a book about the children's book business, that breaks it down, what the highs and lows are, what the struggles are, just really basic things. Why and how to read a contract, why
Mm.
and how to read royalty statements, things like that, but also talks about side hustles, and look at the different things that various authors do to make a living while they're, pursuing their art, to things like self-care and what that looks like when you're in this business and why,
Mhm.
it's an important thing. So it's a very as my editor says, it's a very robust book, 39 chapters worth.
Wow.
It was like
Wow.
but and I was really driven to write this thing because I kept waiting for like an MFA program or an art program to start teaching the business, decade after decade, and it's not happening. And people are wrestling with the same things now that they were when I first came into the business, what, 47 years ago. I said, this is ridiculous. And you have
Wow.
people who are burning out, some who leave the business, out of frustration, people who aren't earning as much as they should because they don't even understand their value in the marketplace. And all of these things have to do with a lack of knowledge, a lack of information. That's
Mhm,
ridiculous. If you're going to leave the business, leave for some other reason, not because you don't know something,
yeah.
that is knowable. You know,
Mhm,
now
yeah.
I understand that a lot of artists are allergic to business. And
Mhm,
so even when they have the information, might not follow it. That's on them. But I want
mhm,
to make sure people have it,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
And
mhm.
and so that's been like my biggest project for the last couple of years. And that's
I love that.
scheduled for publication next August
I love
2024.
that.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because like the next question was actually you often tackle tough conversations or difficult themes, but you craft them in a way that really resonates with young readers. But at the same time, you can give it to an adult, a young adult, a middle schooler, and I'm talking specifically about your picture books. What is the process of you doing that? Because that is like, for one, not everyone can do it. And number two, you do it in a way that makes it so universal at the same time, right? So you have this difficult topic, but at the same time, you're able to make it in a way that it really is able to connect with all facets of life. Like, what is your process for that? What's the magic, Nikki? What's the magic?
Well, I don't know about magic, but I always seek to climb into the skin of the character I want to write about, to
Mm,
look at the world through his or her eyes,
hmm.
from his or her perspective, and then to do the storytelling from that place. Because if I do that, it's going to be true.
Can you say that again? I love that. Can you say that again?
I climb into the skin of the
Uh-huh.
characters I want to write about so that
Uh-huh.
I can look at and speak about the world through their eyes from their
Mm,
perspective. And if I do that, it's going to be true. And if it takes me a minute to like get into that headspace, well, then I read and I look around me and I talk to the young people in my life. And that voice is always there. They're all around me. I don't have to look far to find them, but sometimes you just have to tune your hearing into that character, that child of that particular age that you want to address. And of course, I go back to my own childhood, which is very much alive for me,
mhm,
so I can tap into that. But when it
mhm.
comes to making sure the language, the dialogue aligns with what kids are using at that moment, I'm listening to the kids around me for
I
that.
can tell. I can
Yeah.
totally tell. I can totally tell because you're every time you release something, whatever calendar year that is, it's so fresh and it's so relatable. And of course, like it's the only way that it could be relatable if you're still tapped into the culture and what kids are into and how they're navigating things. And I love that about you so much because you continue to grow for who you are. You still continue to grow, and that's growing. Like being able to be like, hey, I'm not gonna just like do what I did many years ago. I'm gonna continue to like push myself to reach the kids of today as
Yeah.
well. And you do such a phenomenal job of that. You're just inspiration for generations for young readers and writers will continue to grow for forever. What advice would you offer those who are, you know, seeking similar long lasting like impact in regards to like body of work, because your body of work is, I mean, we talked about it early on, is like top tier. What advice would you have to young writers that are trying to do similar?
One thing I always like to encourage is that you read broadly. Don't just
Mm,
read the particular genre you're interested in. Read everything because every genre has something to teach you.
mhm,
And you don't know what might work for you, what might click for you unless you explore it.
mhm,
Mhm.
mhm,
And to try different things. It doesn't cost you anything to try. Maybe you have an idea and you decided you're going to write it in a particular way, but try it a few different ways. Maybe change up the character who's the main speaker. Try a different gender than you usually write through and see what that might open up for you. You know,
mhm,
and don't be afraid to do that. We learn so much in play. Remember
mhm,
to play always. You're going to learn things as you play.
mhm,
And but that reading piece also is huge. Read all kinds of books by all kinds of authors. You will find some that are closer to your voice and pay attention to those because people always ask, what do you do when if you get writer's block? I tap into those voices. For me, there are three people I go to if I am blocked. It doesn't happen often, but if I am blocked, I will read a little Lucille Clifton or a Gary Soto or J. California Cooper. Any of those will take me back to my own voice. Just a few pages and something will open up, click, and I'm like, and now I'm back where I need to be.
mhm,
And as you're reading, you will figure out who those authors are for you, and have them sort of, just in your back pocket. So you get to
mhm.
that place where you're stuck and just read a little bit of those particular authors, and that will always shake something loose.
Thank you
Yeah.
for that. I think that is such great advice. And before we go again, I want to just share how much I appreciate you as a writer who's just released their first book in October, and someone who has,
Yay!
you are that person for me. When I am not having a voice, I look at your work and I'm always trying to read as a writer, and I am constantly looking to see like what would Nikki do? What would Nikki do? That's what I asked myself. What would Nikki do? So I'm honestly cherishing this moment so much because you are someone who I genuinely enjoy and appreciate, and you are constantly sending the elevator back down and reaching out and sharing information. And I just appreciate the space that you've created for writers, because if it wasn't for you, people like me wouldn't have had opportunities. Your voice is so important in this work, and I appreciate it so much. So,
Thank
from
you.
the bottom of my heart, I really genuinely do appreciate you, and I thank you for spending time with me today.
My pleasure.
Yeah, you were awesome. Thank you. Nikki, where can, I mean, again, I hate asking this, but there may be people out here who are, not sure what's happening in the world and who this is, but Nikki, where can people find you online? If people are looking for you online, where can they find you?
You can find me at Twitter, which I refuse to call by that other name.
You're so tapped in. You are so tapped in.
And on Facebook, and you can also find me on Instagram.
Awesome. And active, like very active too, which I think for a lot of authors, I mean, I get it. Being active online can be very difficult because you are working with, you're just writing. Oftentimes you also still have other jobs and it's busy, right?
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
but you
yeah.
are often pretty active, which I appreciate too. So, thank you for your time. Is there books that you would like to share that you have coming out like soon? Is there things that you can share?
Well, not this year. I mean, next year I have a couple coming out. I have let's see. I think in January, what do I have? Glory 2,
Mm.
which is a follow up to Glory in the Margins, and that's for adults. That comes out, I believe, in January. Yay. And
Yes.
of course, Stronger Than, that was the story I talked about with the Black Indigenous character. His
Mm.
name is
Mhm.
Dante, by the way. And one called A Cup of Quiet, because I'm very much concerned with books that show Black characters engaging in nature. So this is another book along those lines. That's what A Walk in the Woods was about. That's what Southwest Sunrise was about, moving into that space. So those are coming out. And then, of course, the big book at the next fall will be the business book, which I originally called B is for Business, and then it had a long second title. And the publisher's already told me they want to change the title. So I don't know what it's going to be called.
But it's coming. All we know is it's coming.
I know it's coming.
We appreciate you so much. Sending all of the flowers your way. And I'm
Thank
sending you all the
you.
best wishes as well. I want you to write in liberation, in enjoyment, as much and as long as you want to. You've already given us so much. And we are very lucky, very, very lucky to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.